Welcome to the FasCat podcast. I'm Frank Overton, and the FasCat Coaches and I are here to take your training to the next level.
And I'm Ben Delaney, and in each episode we'll share our combined 75 years of experience, from coaching Tour de France pros to master Janes and Joes.
At FasCat, we're on a mission to share our knowledge to help you ride faster and have more fun while training. If you listen closely, you should be able to feel yourself getting faster. What's up, FasCat Nation? Big Cat here with Ben Delaney, and this is Ask a FasCat number 25.
We got so many questions from y'all. We appreciate it. Could have been the fact that we put out the call to win a Castelli FasCat kit that brought in so many questions. But we have so many questions, we're going to have to break this podcast in two. So this is number 25, and number 26 will be coming in short order as we go through dozens upon dozens. Like, we got well over 100 questions, and that's too much for one podcast. So we're going to get into the first chunk today. But before we do so, let's roll through some announcements, our review of the week, and then we will get into the Q's and A's.
Yeah, so the FasCat, speaking of Castelli, the FasCat Custom Castelli kit is open. It's on FasCatCoaches.com. Go to the menu and scroll down to jerseys and merch. So we got our hats, t-shirts, jersey, long sleeve jersey, vest, and the free race aero bib live for your wearing pleasure. Stock up before the winter. And yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, so one lucky questioner will win a kit. The rest of y'all can purchase a kit.
Yeah.
Air Race is the top of the line. Yeah, I've been in those all year. Love those things.
They're really nice. We will choose a winner at the end of this episode based on the most thoughtful question. So thank you all for submitting your thoughtful questions.
Another announcement. We need to recognize Coach Isaiah Newkirk, who completed his self-prescribed 7 bicycle challenge. At the beginning of the year, he set out to race every single bicycle in his garage, and he has, I can't even remember how many, but there's a track bike, there's a clunker, there's a mountain bike, there's a gravel bike, there's a road bike. I'm leaving out 2.
Mountain bike?
Yeah, I think a mountain bike.
Time trial
bike? What else? Yeah, TT bike, and then some other tomfoolery, maybe a fat bike. This past weekend, he not only completed, but he won the dang thing. Did the the Frijole distance at the Rad down in Trinidad. So nice work, Coach Isaiah. And bummer about your car getting rear-ended on the way home from said race. That stinks. Glad you're okay.
Yes, glad you're okay. Yeah. Well, should we just get into it? Oh, we got a review of the week.
Let's do a review of the week.
You want to do the honors or me?
I'll hit it. Corey Hegman had this to say: Optimize is awesome. I've used other training platforms where I've mindlessly followed plans to a detriment. I somehow always dig myself a hole I can't get out of. As a master's athlete, I've learned no matter what the plan says, sometimes you just need to rest. Hard to do when you just want to get faster. In comes Optimize. Being able to get a plan and bounce ideas off coaches has been huge. Combine that with the podcast tips, I've really learned to listen more to my body. Not only having more fun, but I'm already getting close to previous peaks in less time.
All right. Nice, Corey. Yeah, keep it up.
I dig it. Thanks for that, Corey. I'm glad to hear. And now, FasCat listeners, we will dig into the Ask a FasCat. I play the role of the questioner, and the big cat plays the role of the expert coach, because that's what he is. Question number 1, coming from Andres J., who says this: I live in Norway and have good cross-country skiing opportunities here. Therefore, I wonder how it would be to replace Zone 2 work with skiing, and in what ratio. Is 1 hour of skiing worth 2 hours on the bike? I plan to do cycling intervals on a bike with studded tires, but just considering doing Zone 2 on skis because of temperature and speed.
Yeah, awesome. So for me, 1 hour of skiing equals 3 hours on the bike because I'm not that technically skilled. So Nordic skiing, it's all about the glide. Andres, if you are good enough where you're efficient enough to do Zone 2, go for it. Around here, I can do Zone 2 as long as the terrain is flat. But as soon as the snow tips up, I'm all arm, just about.
Oh, yeah, you go to Eldor, and it's full-on anaerobic Zone 6.5.
It's humbling.
So wouldn't heart rate be a good way to ascertain that?
Oh, 100%. Wear your heart rate monitor, put your bike computer in your back pocket, record the heart rate data just like you would a bike ride. And yeah, so just keep it chill. And it's a phenomenal workout. When you're doing zone 2, it's 1 for 1 for you. 1 hour of skiing is worth 1 hour on the bike, unless like you're doing a lot of pulling with your arms and then, like in my case, where trust me, after an hour of Nordic skiing, I feel like I've ridden hard for 3 hours. So, yeah, it's great. Do that a lot. And there's a lot of. It used to be back in the day, a lot of world tour riders would Nordic ski in the off season, and that was their one of their secret workouts. Yeah.
John Turbeville asks, how long should one's off season be? I see the 30-week plan, but are there reasons for shorter or longer off seasons?
Yeah, because maybe you get done with the BWR Kansas or Big Sugar next weekend, and you're going to race Mid-South or maybe BWR Arizona. I think the new date is March 2nd. So that would be a shorter season. That would be one to take one. Generally, though, the 30-week plan is about the right length for athletes that do their last race on September, as thereabouts, and then you don't race again until maybe March or April. Pros generally have shorter off seasons because their season goes longer, and then the training camp, and then racing starts. But yeah, there's no magic, like it's got to be 22 weeks or 36 weeks, but 30 weeks allows us to get in 3 weeks fall foundation, 10 weeks weights, and 16 weeks of sweet spot base. If you need to cut that short, the two things to cut are the fall foundation and then just the amount of sweet spot base training you do. So if pressed, you could condense it down to like 12 weeks. So you could get that 16 weeks down to 12.
Along the same lines, Bo Bruns asks, heading into winter weight training, what kind of trainer workouts do you suggest to keep fitness levels from falling off too far if I have a 100 mile event in March, aka Mid-South?
Yeah. Love this question. We have a number of different training tips we've published over the years. I think the most effective thing to do when you're on the trainer in the winter is variable power workouts. It's really difficult to just tap out zone 2 day after day after day, or just steady power output. So go on the website, look at our crisscross and over-unders workout training tip. Go check out our wintertime intensity training tip. But really, the benefit of like the crisscross and the over-unders, you get more bang for your buck, but it's also a diverse amount of training. So it's like, oh, you're doing this for 20 seconds. You're doing that for a minute and a half, and it changes. And it helps the time pass quicker. I don't know. Zone 2 is like, I start looking at my watch like after 4 minutes. And then I'm like, a 30-minute ride can seem long. Some athletes can do it. Coach Jake can belt out 4 hours. We have lots of athletes, doing 4-hour trainer rides on Zwift, and it just depends on your personal preference. But I'm a big fan of 1 hour variable power, advanced aerobic endurance workouts. Not VO2s, not raw full gas intervals, but just crisscrosses, over-unders are the two, and even bursts, sweet spot bursts are fan favorite.
If this seems like too much to keep track of, you can just plug in the 30-week off-season plan, which has your 10 weeks of weights and on-bike workouts that you can do, some inside, some outside. So that's our plug-and-play solution for you. Corey Hegman, back
Corey.
again, asks, how important is VO2 work for master athletes to grow their FTP? I'm guessing that sweet spot will only get me so far. What signs can I look for that I've sweet spotted up the wazoo for too long? I was just going to say, you got a little caveat here. I'm a user of other training tools like WKO and notice my fractional utilization gets to around 80%, and it seems my FTP stops progressing. Not currently, just in the past.
Yeah. Actually, there's a couple of questions in there. Let's start with the VO2 one. VO2 work is amazing to increase your FTP, not only for masters athletes, but all athletes. So yeah, the time you spent over your FTP, VO2 Max will increase your power at threshold, your FTP. Sweet spot will only get you so far. That is correct. You got to, if everyone loyal listeners, you got to switch from base to race. So you go from sweet spotting, and then you do your VO2 work, and then you take all the gains that you have for your power for a sweet spot, and you put the gains from doing FTP from switching from base to race on top of that. And so when is it time to switch from base to race? Of course, that depends, as we always say. But generally, after you've done 16 weeks of sweet spot, you're ready to move on. You've probably hit the point of limiting returns. You can get those adaptations in a shorter amount of time, depending on how much time you have. But yeah, don't sweet spot for more than 16 weeks at a time. And even our 16 weeks of sweet spot plan, guess what the last mesocycle is, Ben?
VO2.
That's right. The 3, 4, 5 minute VO2 max progression is a staple of the fourth and final phase. It's also the basically that describes the sweet spot part 4 plan. The fresh is faster. 3, 5, what we're talking about. So 1 week you do 3-minute VO2s, the next week you do 4-minute VO2s, and then the third week you do 5-minute VO2s. So yeah.
How important is VO2 work? Very important.
Very important.
But like everything at the right time and place at the end of your base. Some guy named Phil Guyman wrote in.
Heck?
I don't know. Am I saying his name right? Usually I'm burned out this time of year, but I'm kind of feeling okay. Do I really need an off season? What's the risk of Strava hunting and doing group rides until the race season?
Yeah. Well, thanks for writing in, Phil. I was just talking with him about this. And yeah, I think it's really common from pros to us amateur Joes and Janes. We do get burned out this time of year. And that's why we do take an off season. I think what Phil's talking about is an off season break. 2 weeks, take the break. And then you're going to feel super motivated, good as new, ready to get back to that Strava hunting. The thing about Strava hunting and doing group rides until the race season, that's fine and good. But if you want to be even better, do a lot of base and maybe save the Strava hunting until the end of your base, and then use Strava hunting as when you switch from base to race as your intensity to get ready for the race season.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I like it.
Yeah, go Phil.
Freedom Santos asks, is it okay to do a structured workout even if you only have 4 hours of sleep a night every week? I'm a father of 3 and I work a cleaning business at night. I work 7 p.m. to 1 a.m., sometimes 2 a.m., and then I wake up at 7:30 a.m. to prepare the kids for school and then work 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. Oof. What is the best training plan for a busy dad like me?
Yeah, Dad Watts right there. That's what is going on. Great question. I've been there. I haven't worked from 7 to 1. I did once and it crushed me. But yeah, so honestly, if that's going to be just like a persistent situation, Freedom, what I would do is just try to do the work on the plan and, just know that you're not going to be like crushing souls when you've had 4 hours of sleep, and find ways just to keep making forward progress, knowing that you might, it's okay. I've done bike races where like flight got delayed and, like when Jackson and I went to the Haute Route, like we showed up at the hotel at 1 a.m. after a long day of travel, and they're like, yeah, we don't have a reservation for you. Mm-hmm. And so, 2 hours later we found a hotel, but we got like 2 hours of sleep, and you can do it. You'll be surprised, but try not to make a habit out of it and, catch up on sleep in other places, but you can still have good workouts on 4 hours of sleep. And, just look for other ways to adapt and just kind of keep it. You just understand the limitations. Yeah. But good luck. That's kudos to you for doing what you're doing.
One thing to note, you asked, what's the best plan for a busy dad like you? It could be a variety of them. In Optimize, almost all of our plans scale to your available amount of time to train. So that would be our recommendation, is that, just set whichever plan you pick that makes most sense to you, and the coaches can help you pick a plan based on what your goals are. Just set that plan at the lowest amount of available time. There's, again, 3 different chunks of available time. So just set it at the lowest. That would be our recommendation.
Yeah, 4 to 8 hours per week. Maybe not try the 8 to 12 until you're able to get more sleep. But you could probably still do it. It's just wouldn't be great. It might be great. Who am I to judge? Yeah.
Chris Carter says, for ultra endurance athletes, how many races should be targeted as A status races in a season, not to burn out? And he's talking about 150 to 200 mile races.
Yeah, awesome question, Chris. So I'm going to answer that in two ways. I'm going to answer that in one way from our friend Bob, who is a Grand Master, 62. 200-mile unbound gravel crushes him for a good month, even like 6 weeks afterwards. So so try to space them out by at least 6 weeks. And maybe, I'll just throw out some numbers, maybe like 2 of those per year, maybe 3. So, so you could do like a BWR and a unbound and a steamboat gravel. Like if you were doing the full distance of each of those. Now, I think, Chris, you might be a little younger. Yeah. So, honestly, these races leave a mark no matter how old or young you are. I think everyone finishes these races like completely depleted. And I think 4 years ago, I said no more than 1 per month and no more than 4 to 6 months in a row. But that kind of encompasses, back then it was like Mid-South through like Steamboat. 1 a month, definitely not. But it really just depends. I mean, some athletes maybe your first gravel season, don't select 6 of these. Maybe select 1 or 2 and then work your way up from there. Me personally, for the longest time, I did 1 a year and it was super fun. I like to target the Crusher and the Tusher. And it was the one race I targeted every year. And it was a nice change of pace from doing road races and crits every single weekend for 6 months at a time. So kind of depends. There's probably no one wrong or right way unless you just try to bite off more than you can chew. And guess what? You'll know it when you get out there, and then you'll be like, F this. I'm not going to race for a while. So, yeah.
One of our podcasts in our 8-pod off-season how-to series was reviewing your season and looking back at your data and your notes and your recollections of like, okay, how did it go this year for you when you did 2 of these mega events? How long did it take you until you were feeling normal again? How long until your optimized numbers came back, until your HRV came back up, until your fatigue went away? Yeah. Like that's you're your best barometer of how you're going to respond to it. And I think that's one thing that if you were working with a coach one-on-one, that's where they would start. It's like, okay, let's see how you have responded in the past to different loads in terms of how you perform on race day and how long it takes you to come back. And then we'll use that as a baseline for going forwards to answer your question. So this is a longer way to say what Frank said. It depends.
Yeah. How many races did you do?
Too many. Probably like 15, 12 or 15.
Yeah. And you were doing you weren't doing the fulls, were you?
No, I think the longest one I've done this year was Nationals, which was 130. Yeah, because there's that as you said, that 200 miler, like that will crack you good and for a while. And a lot of that's the same with a lot of the pros too. We'll talk about how that they have to change their schedule around just because the cumulative fatigue is real. Yeah. Most athletes that do before the Lifetime Grand Prix series, if you did Unbound, you were not going to be great at Crusher. And if you didn't do Unbound, you had a chance of being great at Crusher. Yeah. But yeah. And now Keegan he's great at all of them. But he's a cyborg. He is a cyborg. Just Rob Britton, another very talented, long-time pro racer, won things like Tour of Utah, obviously high-level UCI stage races. He recently won Badlands, this mega 500-mile event in Spain, and went deep to do so. And he had to pull the plug on the rest of the season. Wow. Like he went to Schwam again and was garbage. Decided he couldn't do Trinidad, was just like he's in bits. And it took him a while to come to that conclusion, like, okay, I want to be ready. Yeah. But my body's not ready. Brain is, body's not. And that's a guy who
Yeah, he's
has
Stage
raced
race
as a profession for years and years. So, yeah, a little bit longer, but the same principle applies. Like these mega endurance events are, if you're racing them, if you're really pushing yourself, like it takes a lot out of you.
Yeah, respect the recovery, Chris.
Yeah. Good question. Matthew Angelis, apologies if I'm butchering your name, asked this. I'm currently riding 10 to 12 hours a week. For the off season, I'd like to mix it up by incorporating strength and cross training. How many hours a week of saddle time should I aim for to not completely lose bike fitness? I sense a theme here. People want to keep the fitness going
Yeah.
in the off season.
Yeah. So commend you, Matthew. I know we keep talking about this 10-week weightlifting plan, but I do believe when you're lifting 3 to 5 times per week, you're also riding approximately like 6 to 8 hours plus. I would need to go back and calculate that, but you're still riding on the weekend, and then you're still doing zone 2 and some muscle tension intervals and various other workouts during the week. So it's not all or nothing when you're weightlifting. And yeah, so we have you do. We don't like completely shut down the bike. You're just doing less than you maybe would during the rest of the year. So yeah, follow a plan is probably the best way to think about it. As opposed to how much saddle time you should do. Because when you do the two together, you're actually training really well. It just may not feel like your CTL is not going to go up. You're not going to impress your friends on Strava, but your physiology will be primo.
Jason Bryant says, I am planning on doing the Tour Divide next year. How do I train for such an event? Not just cycling, but also diet and off the bike complementary training.
Yeah. Wow. Well, go to the nearest hill and practice pushing your bike up it.
Fully loaded.
Yeah. And in terms of diet, maybe this is like the gas station diet. Don't be so rigid with your diet that, you can't have a Coca-Cola or... Do you see the pictures of like Lachlan? Like
I was just about to say.
Like a carton of milk and Oreos.
And beer.
Yeah.
Yeah, one stop was like a half gallon of milk, a big old thing of Oreos, like a full like double, triple sleeve, whatever it is, and a couple beers. Yeah.
Yeah. So what they call that is gut diversity. And we talk, you joke, or we joke, but 20 years ago when we were sending U-23s to Belgium and they were used to their American food, we were like, you got to get used to European food. And you cannot be that guy that raises their hand and says, I don't like this. You got to be able to handle a variety of foods. Same way you're going to have to do with the Tour Divide. I suppose you can practice it off the bike complementary training. I would do a lot of hiking. Maybe, I hate to say it, maybe a little bit of running, not too much. Probably some cross training would be good for you. Definitely weightlifting.
Get your back strong.
Yeah, do your foundations. Oh my gosh. The one thing you probably want to work on is riding at night and riding in the cold and riding in the rain and dressing warm. I mean, like the pictures from like Lachlan and Ted and Alex Howes. I mean, those guys, like there was this one picture, like he's got like his hood over his head and his helmet over his hood. And it was just pouring rain. And he's wearing like rain pants. And, I would also work on your post holing because in some years, not all the snow is gone. So maybe go snowshoeing this winter if you can, stuff like that. I wouldn't just do the bike. And yeah.
Yeah, that's another one for getting outside. Like intervals inside are all fine and good, but you're not going to be doing the Tour Divide on the trainer.
Amen to that.
Stephen Lee asks, how do you get over a plateau? Mm-hmm. I keep increasing my efforts for threshold, but I am stuck.
Yeah. Great question, Stephen. Honestly, do something different. Generally when athletes get stuck is because they've reached the point of diminishing returns. They're doing the same thing over and over and over, and then it's just, they're stuck. So believe it or not, and I've had guys, gals do this before, but when they're just stuck at 75 training load and they've been there for 6 months and they can't go any higher, it sucks to hear it, but just take a rest week, let it go down and suck in that adaptation and recovery. And then if you've been doing threshold, let's not do threshold for a while. Maybe do VO2, kind of like what we were talking about with Corey. Maybe do some anaerobic work, do some sweet spot work, and, build your base back up, and then if you've been building base, switch from base to race, do a VO2 anaerobic. And then if you've been doing that and, you've been resting a lot, your form, you've kind of peaked, that's go back to sweet spotting. And, there's a variety of ways. I guess if I could sum it up in one thing is do something different. And if you've been training so long, take a break. And if you've been weightlifting too long, take a break, move on.
Jose Rivera is also stuck in a different way. Jose says this: I've been riding all year, about 6,000 miles total, and I cannot seem to lose weight. I've been getting stronger and more fit, but I feel like my weight is holding me back. I'm a vegetarian and eat approximately 2,000 to 3,000 calories a day. I also work on my feet all day. What can I do? Okay,
great. Let's start with, vegetarian, eat approximately 2 to 3K a day. First I'll find out how much you're burning per day. 3K is not too much, but it could be if you're not exercising. How many hours a week are you riding? 6,000 miles total. What does that come out to be per year? I cannot do the math in my head on the fly like that. But another thing you could try to do, kind of like Steven, is try some new recipes. And we do have a introduction to winning in the kitchen meal plan. We have a weight loss meal plan. It is vegetarian compatible. I would just try to do something different. And you mentioned working on your feet all day. That is tiring. That's a completely different question, though. Just do something different. That's my suggestion.
Wilf Marquise asks, which time of day is the most optimal for training? I typically Zwift at 5 a.m., but feel like my workouts later in the day are more productive.
Yeah. It's funny. A number of years ago, a journalist reached out to me. What's the best time of day to go for your Strava PR? And
3:27 p.m. and not a second too late.
Yeah. I mean, some athletes are at their best in the morning. Some are the best in the afternoon. I grew up playing sports after school, so I'm great. If I could choose any day to work out, it's like 3:30. Except on the weekends. I like to ride at 10 a.m. on the weekends. But so don't really worry about the what's the best time of day for you that's for you to really answer. 5 a.m. sounds awfully early. I'm not that great at 5 a.m. How about you, Ben?
I'm not doing anything at 5 a.m.
Yeah. So I know maybe this question is coming from our 7 Successful Habits of Masters Racers, where we say they work out in the morning. That's more of like a consistency, develop good training habits type of piece of advice. But if you feel like you're better in the afternoon and your life fits in around that, by all means, try that. See if that's more productive for you.
Billy Rice asks, with all the buzz of AI, does Optimize You is AI, or are people really building the training? Do training zones alter throughout the training, or is that updated automatically?
Yours truly designed those training plans. Yeah. And then as we develop more and more, the FasCat coaches design those themselves. So real people designing real training plans just for you. In terms of the training zone, so for the longest time, when we have you do field tests and you set a higher threshold, so you go into your training zones, and you update your FTP manually. Great features if that updates, manually automatically, and then it updates your zones. But the biggest thing to remember is the threshold you have entered in your training zones in your profile, then that updates your zones, which updates your workouts. And we can do that with software. We can do it manually, whatever, tool that you're using. And real people are designing your training plan.
Jonathan Kaplan says, if I have 5 hours a week to ride and want to lose weight, how should I structure that week?
Okay. So the thing about losing weight is it's just sustaining a caloric deficit over time. And how much time you're riding per week just means you're not expending as much at 5 hours as you maybe would if you were riding 10 hours a week. So you can do it by math. You can calculate your total daily caloric expenditure by your basal metabolic rate, add how much you ride on top of that, and then subtract how much you eat, and do you come out over or under? So 5 hours a week, that comes out to be, I don't know, 50 minutes a day. That's maybe, depending on your threshold and stuff. You use your power meter, and 1 kilojoule from your power equals about 1 calorie of food, is the way the math works out. And think in terms of that. But it sounds, if I want to lose weight, yeah, I would get on our weight loss meal plan too. That's going to just spell it out for you. And when you do that, you're going to enter in, this is key, you're going to enter how much you're training per week. And you're training 5 hours per week, so you're going to select the 4 to 8 hours a week. And then it's also based on your body weight, so you're going to enter in how much you weigh, and then gender. And so then those three criteria help set the amounts that you will eat for all your snacks, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, 4 weeks. And yeah, give it a go.
Yeah, I'm guessing that question comes from the long-standing phrase of a fat-burning ride, right? Like low and slow is fat burning, but if you only got so much time, would more intensity burn more body fat more quickly? Is probably what he's thinking there. Mm-hmm. Many different ways to skin the cat, but less in than before is the long-term answer, however you put it.
Yeah, if you're riding less, you need to eat less if you want to lose weight.
John Living Good
Hey, John.
asks, what are some good metrics to keep track of as one moves through base training? I mean, beyond FTP increases and ATL and CTL.
Yeah, I really like to just look at total weekly hours and concentrate on that. Concentrate on consistency. This is nothing sexy, though. CTL is probably the best metric for base training. Training load, CTL. I suppose you could look at you could do lactate testing, which would be incredible because you could take where your threshold was and where your lactate was at the beginning and at the end. You could do like a muscle biopsy and look at some blood markers. But yeah, honestly, base training is just good old fashioned time in the saddle, and I don't think there's any great power metrics out there that are better than just your training load and your FTP.
Yeah, I mean, you hear pros talking about it, and it is surprisingly simple. Mm-hmm. It's just hours. And there's the understanding that those hours aren't junk hours, and that's where the training load comes in, that you're not just sitting there coasting, and that's why a lot of the pros will ride by themselves or in small groups and not just sit and draft at the back, because that's not the same as pedaling. Mm-hmm. Drafting for 4 hours isn't the same as pedaling for 4 hours, but
I think as I now think about it, I would say also look at your power to heart rate ratio. And so if you're doing base for, let's say you do base for 3 months, so 12 weeks, and you could take a look. So my heart rate is 130 when I ride 200 watts for 3-4 hours. And then maybe that 200 watts in 6 weeks, now your heart rate is 125. So it's you're getting more efficient. And then you can do it the other way. So your heart rate at zone 2 during your base season is, let's say it's 125 beats per minute. So in month 1, you're riding at 200 watts. And then in month 2, you're like 208. While the heart rate stays the same. And then when you're really getting after it and you've got a lot of base, maybe now that 125 beat per minute 4-hour ride, you're achieving average wattages of 215 watts. And that would be a great metric to track. And I think as I say that, you cannot forget your recovery. Look at your HRV as you go from the beginning to the end of base. Are you recovering better, the same? Really, it's going to be, look at the trend. It's not going to be what's happening on a day-to-day basis. I suppose you could keep track of how much sleep you're getting. See if you're just recovering better. And but I would also, in addition to training load, look at your power to heart rate ratio if you really want to nerd out.
Listener Ben Delaney writes in with a follow-up question. The power to heart rate ratio, is that for the entire ride each time, or are you zooming in on particular chunks to get that? Yeah.
So that's a great follow-up question. Thank you. There's a variety of ways to kind of think about it. So say you do a 4-hour ride, you can look at your heart rate in the first hour to your power, and you can look at your heart rate in the last hour to your power. Guess what? This is why we tell athletes sometimes to do their zone 2 rides by heart rate, because as they get tired, if you do it by watts and you're like, oh, I got to maintain 170 watts, heart rate goes from zone 2 to tempo, and they may be pushing like low sweet spot heart rates towards the end of the 4-hour ride for the same wattage. That just means they need more base. They're not efficient at that point. So you can break it up and look at beginning and the end. You can also look at it from the whole. The same thing will apply, but generally when athletes get tired, that's what you call heart rate drift. And when the heart rate begins to drift up, it means, okay, that might be your limit. I'm good aerobically for 3.5 hours, but my heart rate drifted up in the final 30 minutes of the 4-hour ride. And you can look to eliminate that heart rate drift as you go on. What we generally do when we prescribe training and duration over the course of the base is like you get really good at a 3-hour ride, and then we progress you up. You get really good at a 4-hour ride, we progress you up. You get really good at a 5-hour ride. So the first 5 hours when you're doing a base training is a big lift. It's an effort. But 12 weeks later, 5-hour rides should be your bread and butter, when you're really preparing for like these long gravel events. And I'm not saying you have to do 5-hour rides. I'm just saying if that's what you're planning, maybe doing a 3-hour ride would be your big lift, and then that becomes your bread and butter. But yeah, when you do, one caveat, when you do look at power to heart rate, make sure you factor in if you take stops, like if you stop at the coffee shop, or how like we stop at the dam at Carter Lake, take that out of the analysis. But if you pedal steady for 4 hours straight, you should be able to look at the whole ride, or you can break it up for like the beginning and the end. It doesn't have to be the first hour and the last hour. It can be the first 30 minutes. It can be like wait until you get going and you've warmed up. So it can be like minutes 30 to 60, and then the final like 30 minutes before you kind of, how you kind of coast in the last 5 minutes. You're like,
and take that bit out.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm gonna do that this winter. John Schrollmeyer. I'm going to be racing the Washita Challenge in late March 2024. It's a 65-mile gravel event on Saturday, followed by a 65-mile mountain bike event on Sunday. How should I be training for such an event? I currently do about 10 hours a week on the bike, consisting of 3 60 to 90-minute sessions on the trainer, doing zone 2, sweet spot, or over-unders, or some form of high-intensity intervals. On the weekend, I do my long rides, usually 40 to 70 miles on gravel or 25-ish on mountain bike. Pace depending on how I'm feeling or what I'm trying to get done that week.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you're doing all the right things, John. Make sure you add periodization, rest weeks, builds, overloads. Really drive up your training load as high as you can get it with the sweet spot and the zone 2. Concentrate on a lot of that. Progress. Maybe you said you were doing, what was his total weekly hours in there? Didn't really say.
About 10 hours a week.
10 hours a week. So one thing I would suggest as you get closer to March, periodize your training. So you could do 6 hours, 8 hours, 10 hours. You could do 7 hours, 9 hours, 11 hours, and then put in some overload in there. Don't be afraid to do an 8, 10, 12. And then if you really are getting frisky and you want to really push it out, look at maybe doing like a 4-day training camp, maybe like 2 to 3 weeks before the event for the Washita Challenge. Go ride the course. There's a lot of stuff you can do. Lift weights though. Now you can lift weights now and then get on to do like sweet spot base and but you're on the right track. That's the biggest thing.
Spencer Dale asks, how do you recommend training to build up fatigue resistance for crits and circuit races when crunched for time? This past season, that was my biggest limiter in Cat 3 races. Though my power numbers were some of the best I've ever done, my ability to go deep over and over seemed to be lacking. I'm unable to get in the longer 2 to 3 hour rides sometimes prescribed in the plan. Any specific workouts or plans to help in this area?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, why can't you get in those 2 to 3 hour rides? Because as I was reading your question, I was like, okay, let's build up a solid base. That's going to support your fatigue resistance when you do those high intensity efforts and crits. So maybe this year, look at putting in a significant base and unable to get in the longer 2 to 3 hour rides. So maybe try to figure out a day where you can get that in. And then you can also, you don't have to like do it year round, but try to do some, 3, 4, 5 hour rides to build that base. So that's part one. Then part two, once you've built that base. So I call zone 6 anaerobic capacity. And so here's a workout, for example, 5 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off. That's 5 total minutes of zone 6. That's your capacity. Now progress up. So you can do 2 sets, 3 by 1, 2 sets of 4 by 1, 2 sets of 5 by 1. So I just went from 6, 8 to 10 minutes total of anaerobic work. And so not only do the intervals, increase the amount of intervals you do. So I think one of the most diabolical workouts you can do is 3 sets, 7 by 1 minute on, 1 minute off. That's 21 minutes of anaerobic work. If you can do that, I think you'll be all set for your crits. Do 30-30s, do Tabatas, do the point. Like, it's great to make like 600 watts for a few intervals, but think about making like 450 watts for like 10 or 15 or 20, because when you extend out the amount you can do and recover from, that's how you're going to be able to survive all the jumps and the accelerations and the bursts of power that come in these crits and circuit races. So part one, build a bigger base than you have before, carve out that time. And then part two is progress your anaerobic workouts, increase the capacity and the amount you do. You don't necessarily have to worry about the amplitude of power output.
Shannon Edson, I love listening to the FasCat podcast and recently listened to the one on weight training. I'd love to know how to maintain the strength gained in the weight room during the preseason and racing season months without compromising on the bike training. So my question is, what does weight training look like after those 10 weeks?
Yeah. So believe it or not, when you're doing intervals and you're riding, your body will maintain the adaptations that you achieve in the weight room. There is a half-life, eventually those adaptations do fall away, but then you get back in the weight room the next off season. This is the age-old question. And then what you can do, you could, depending on if you're racing or not, the racing season months, sometimes I'm going to blow y'all's mind with, this is going to be something. Okay. Say you do a block of racing from March through May. So you lift weights now in the fall, do your block of racing. You'll maintain those muscular gains you achieved in the weight room. And then, so say you take a break from racing starting after Memorial Day, you could get back in the gym. You could go and, do some squats, leg press, leg curl. Then you could, maintain or maybe even build those and then get back to racing, do like a second half of the season. Like that's what our friends do in, Texas and Arizona, where it's super hot in the summer. Their base season's like then. So when it's super hot in Arizona and Texas, you could get back in the weight room. So
mind blowing. You're right.
Yeah. All right, here we go. We're going to pick it up. We're way behind you guys. We don't want to get dropped.
Mike Luart says, as the off season is upon us, I have a couple of questions about nutrition. It is well answered on the importance of consuming carbs while on the bike, but what about during off-season weightlifting? Should you take in any carbs during the 30-minute ride before and after sessions? Should you consume more protein post-workout to help build muscle? Yes. When is the best time to work on changing body composition and lose some weight? Yeah.
I don't know about you all, but when I lift weights, my hunger goes up. And listen to your body and feed it. Not in all things, carbs, protein, fats. I mean, do your recovery shakes in that 30 minutes post-workout. 4-to-1 carb to protein ratio is yes. Don't try to lose weight while you're lifting weights because you'll run out of energy and not be able to have the oomph to lift the weights. So lift the weights, and then when you begin your base, then that's a great time to lose the weight.
Joseph Oriana asks, what's the longest duration I can stay in the base phase before having to start a building phase?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
We have you build during the base phase and then switch from base to race with high intensity interval training.
Yeah. Great question, Joseph. So honestly, the way that we do our base, it's you're building your base and you're building at the same time. So you go from sweet spot part 1 to part 2, part 3, part 4. Part 3 is aggressive. Part 4 is that even has VO2. So it's base and build at the same time in a progressive way. So when you do 16 weeks, it's not like you're just doing base. You're still doing a build. So I kind of, and then when you switch from base, you're no longer building when you do the intervals. So the longest duration I can stay in the base phase, 16 weeks if you're following our 16-week sweet spot plan. And then you're switching over to that high intensity. And that's when your total weekly hours drop. If you've been doing 8 to 12 when you're building, you might do 6 to 8 when you're smashing VO2 and anaerobic capacity workouts or threshold.
Michael Ziomek says, in mountain bike racing, how does a crash affect your adrenaline and your energy? I've had a couple instances where I'm feeling great, but then I crash and stop for a couple minutes to get my handlebars back in place. And after I get back on the bike and start racing again, I feel totally depleted and without any watts.
Yeah, you kind of lose your mojo too, your rhythm. Like a crash in a mountain bike race, sometimes it just depends on the severity or the nature of the crash. Sometimes I'll bounce right back up. You get this rush of adrenaline, you keep going. And then that adrenaline abates and subsides, and then you're like, oh. It's kind of like that caffeine or sugar crash. And you just got to keep pushing through it. But if you get like hurt big time, I was just watching a video of Kate Courtney, and she crashed in the World Cup and did like a somersault, and she jumped right back up, and she goes over to her bike, but then she puts both hands on her handlebars and kind of bends over, and she's like had to take a couple of deep breaths. You could tell it hurt her. And it just depends. But crashing really tests your mental resolve. But yeah, expect a big adrenaline rush, and then it could it could crash after that. You could experience low energy, and you just kind of try to keep going. Find your rhythm. That's the best thing.
And make sure, take a second or 5 or 10 to make sure you're okay, especially if you hit your head. Like, definitely give yourself an honest check. And if you're having a hard time figuring out where you are, pull the plug. That's just I'm not a doctor, but I've hit my head way too many times, and I've seen the aftermath of people who have hit their head hard. So yeah, just be careful if you've whacked your head, and it's no longer about the performance there. It's about your long-term health.
Good advice. Good advice.
David McKay, should someone with a sprinter's profile train differently to someone with a TT power profile?
Yes.
For example, someone with a type 2 muscle type versus someone with type 1 who is explosive and has good peak numbers but can't sustain big numbers for a prolonged period.
Yeah, 100%. You train towards your individual strengths and weaknesses. It also depends on what you're training for. If you're a sprinter training for races that have sprints, lean into that sprint power. If you are a threshold athlete that can do sustained power, but you're training for a race that has a sprint at the end, well, but take a look at your choices, but you would definitely want to work on your sprint. And then, but then like in your base, generally the fast twitch athletes really need to work on their base. So it's like you train your weakness and you leverage your strength. So if you're really explosive, you got good peak power output numbers, work on your base like a lot in the off season. But then when it comes time to compete, lean into that sprint, and vice versa. If you're like a T-tier and you might work on not many T-tiers plan on working on their sprint, but just kind of, know your strengths and weaknesses. You can do you can test for it, the old fashioned power profile testing where you test your 5 second, your 1 minute, your 5 minute, and your 20 minute power output.
Brian Gee asks, how do you recommend reframing goals from winning to still racing and valuing the process? When you cat up or age up, you likely end up back at the bottom. What's the reasonable process? And how do you do this as you age from your 40s into your 50s?
Great question. Well, it's funny, when you age up, you go from the bottom to the top of your category. So like all the cyclocrossers are like, yeah, I'm racing. I've gone from 40 plus, getting my butt kicked when I was 49 to now I'm 50 and I'm at the top of the heap. Just find what's fun for you, and make sure you're racing your fun stuff. X-nay the stuff that's not fun. I think racing with the guys and the gals that you're racing with, I think is a part of that. I always tended to race with the people that I liked, and I stopped racing with the people that I didn't like. It's a pretty simple formula, but yeah, it's a process, trial and error, I suppose. I think also as you age from your 40s to 50s, cyclocross racing in my 40s was really hard. And when I got up into the high 40s, low 50s, I was like, man, that's too hard now. Yeah, of course I'm doing, these long gravel races. This is a different type of hard. Cross country mountain biking when I was in my 20s and 30s, hard. And like, there's no way I'm doing a 2-hour full gas cross country mountain bike race right now. So maybe think about like the difficulty of your racing. I think that's why gravel racing is so popular. It's like difficult, but it's not difficult. Not like full gas XC mountain biking and cyclocross. And it's also not as, no offense to road racing, but it's like you ride around for 3 hours and then you go hard for the last like 30 minutes. But gravel racing, you get your fill right away. But at the same time, yeah, it's not like this full gas hour and a half suffer fast like cyclocross and cross country mountain biking can be. So I don't know, find what you like, find what you're good at, have fun, race hard, go fast.
Yeah, I'd second the gravel thing, in part because there's always somebody to be racing with. It's like a long range, much larger cross format. One thing I liked about cross is I was almost never at the front, but there's always somebody there with you. You're trying to like, okay, I just don't want that person to catch me. I want to try to catch that person. But in gravel, it's like that, but with bigger groups. Usually there's a group somewhere to race with.
The race within the race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, find your fun. Sandis Sakau. Again, I apologize if I've messed up your name. How can a cycling coach assess and address common issues like overtraining and burnout in their athletes? Mm-hmm. What warning signs should coaches be vigilant for?
I think the first way that we prevent overtraining is just use our experience of knowing what's too much. And then, if you're under that, life is going to be good. Recovery can be expected. If you're really training hard and you bump up to the hours in which we have experience with of knowing what's too much, then you really need to be paying attention to a variety of things, mood, motivation, obviously HRV and sleep, nutrition. We do see decreases in power output when you're getting close to overtraining. I think overreaching is like, okay, it's like you want to overreach, but you don't want to overtrain. I went to an exercise physiologist once told me, because I went to them, I was like, I think I'm overtrained. They're like, it's really difficult to overtrain yourself. And here's why. And it was like, a litany of like, you need to be like chronically overtraining for like 3, 4, 5 months. And I've had athletes that do that. And then the single best way to prevent overtraining is take a rest week every 4 weeks. So 3 weeks on, 1 week off. Rest week. That's a recipe to prevent overtraining. You can still overreach, you rest, and then you're better at the end of that rest week. But pay attention to your mood. If you get grumpy, some athletes, when you're working with them, you can notice when they get grumpy. You can also notice when they get moody. Maybe they get pissed off more. Maybe they get the sniffles. That's also, immunocompression. I hope I answered your question. Power output. And, that's why we always ask, how do you feel, man? How are you feeling? And they're like, coach, I'm tired. If you get a coach, I'm tired, like 3 or 4 days in a row, if you get a coach, I'm tired, after they've had a rest day, something's up. You need to take a look at that. So then you dive in more. But yeah, and of course, the optimized training to recovery balance, that's why we invented it, came up with it. Combine your power output, your heart rate, the stress from your bike, combine that with the recovery that we measure from your sleep and your HRV, and we help present to you that balance. And are you in the red? Keep recovering. Are you in the green? Go forth and conquer.
Deb Sagan asks, how do you determine accurate heart rate zones, particularly for fit, active, 60-plus competitive women?
Yeah, a simple threshold heart rate test will suffice. And so, Deb, you just get out there, and a great way is just give her for about 20 minutes and just take your average heart rate. And that is going to be your threshold heart rate, and use that for your training zones. And simple as that.
Peter Olnichek asks, what are some strategies for reflecting on 2023's training plan in hopes of making 2024's the best yet?
Yeah. This cue, Coach Isaiah's review your season training tip and podcast, I do believe that he just did. Look at your data. That's the best way. What went well, what didn't. Look at your total training load, peak CTLs, peak training loads. How many hours a week were you training? When did you have your best form? What was your, FTP in the spring versus the summer versus the fall? And the single best way to be better in 2024 than you were in 2023, look at your average weekly hours. Let's say they were 8.3. Guess what? If you average 9, you're going to be better. I guarantee it. If you averaged 9.5, maybe try 10. It's just a little bit every day, but it adds up in a big way to be better for next year. If you didn't lift weights last off season, try lifting weights this off season. If you slacked off on your VO2s, add those this year. There's a lot of ways that you can, but it begins with reviewing what you did and then generally adding more to that next year. Maybe you didn't recover that well. Maybe you renovated the house. There's that too. Maybe you had a child and then now you're not. Maybe they went to college and you're like, sweet.
I took a rest week, but it was not a rest week at all.
Yeah, he just remodeled his kitchen.
I'm wrecked. I'm so wrecked.
Yeah.
Casey Ralston says, I've been coveting the FasCat jersey and biz for so long. Was really excited when I saw the Instagram post advertising the Ask FasCat winner getting a kit. Here's my question. I love to ride gravel and road shoes when conditions allow. I feel like the power transfer from my feet to the pedals is significantly higher, but I haven't tested this theory scientifically. Can you tell me if it's just my imagination or if there's something to my hypothesis?
Well, I love it, Casey, because I trained in my Dura-Ace pedals and my road shoes up until about 2 years ago. And the only reason I switched is because I started to do like adventure rides and training, and that required a lot of on and off the bike and maybe like, jumping over a fence or some hike a bike. And then it just became impractical. But heck yeah, man, it's like those carbon fiber soles and those Dura-Ace pedals, you're like locked in. It feels like you got an extra 5 to 10 watts.
I wish there was a way to test this hypothesis, Casey, because if so, I would do it. Gosh darn it.
Yeah.
Because that is very much, you're not alone in this hypothesis. And, looking around at the pro gravel races, it's a mix. It definitely skews more towards mountain bike pedals. I think just for the practical reasons that Frank stated, it's a lot easier to walk around in mud and dirt and rocks in mountain bike shoes. But, Payson McIlvain's a mountain bike racer. He wears road shoes, road cleats for gravel races. And yeah, it's the feel. I mean, so much of it's feel. Like if it feels better to you, go with it, man.
Yeah. And I would say if you do decide to go with it, just ask yourself during the race, am I going to have to get off the bike? And if you are, that's maybe use your mountain bike shoes. Because like if you're doing Unbound and there's guaranteed walking, don't use the road cleats because they pack up with mud and then it's really, sometimes it could be difficult to clip back in. But like a crusher where you're never off the bike or a steamboat, never off the bike, yeah, rock those carbon fiber soles.
Ever Slick won Unbound in a mutter.
Oh, yeah.
In his Dura-Ace cleats. But, yeah.
Did he get off? He might have not gotten off the bike.
He was off the bike one stretch.
Yeah.
And then stomped down at like 9,000 watts and cleared the mud. But I think you're onto that already, as you say, when conditions allow. So is there a way to test it? If you find one, let me know, and I will go forth and do so. It would require like a power meter inside the shoe to determine what power is coming directly from your foot, and then a power meter on the bike. That's the only way I could figure it, and such things do not commercially exist yet. Ulrich Zindler says, follow-up question to the weight training episode. How often would you train weights during the season? And would that still be explosive weight training with just lower weights, or would that be standard squats, for example, at a normal speed just to maintain muscle mass?
Yeah, okay. So in advanced situations, in cases of cyclocross or criteriums or sprint races, after the power phase, I have successfully had athletes continue on with plyometrics. Yes. So a lot of our cyclocross training plans, cyclocross athletes are doing plyos after the power phase. So that would be one way, and that's explosive. It's not weight training per se, but it's the explosivity, if that's a word, is really what continues and even enhances that adaptation. But lower weights, you could just do more of the power phase, I suppose. So like our power phase is 2 to 3 weeks. And if you had the time and you had the time to build the base afterwards, you could extend the power phase by another week or two. And, don't go back to the slow stuff. Maintain that speed specific, explosive, acceleratory type of lifting.
I got lost there for a second. Now I'm back. Sam Curry asks, during or post weightlifting block, do your legs lose their leg speed? Mm-hmm. If so, what's the best / fastest way to get it back?
Yeah, I mean, my legs kind of turned to cement blocks during the hypertrophy phase, even during the adaptation phase. I remember when I first started doing it, I tried to race cyclocross one year, and boy, did I suck. It was like you get into the race, and you're like, wow, I'm really off the back. Then, I don't know. So, but what's the best way to get it back? It comes back. Just remember, it's a process, and you got a lot of time and adaptation coming to you. So trust the process, trust the plan. One great way to prevent that. So we have you doing the zone 2 warm up before and after you lift. When you do that, try to spin like high cadence, like as maybe 85, 95 RPMs. I used to get on the Johnny G Schwinn bikes at the gym. And back then they were fixed gear. Mm-hmm. Man, I would just hum over about 95 RPM, zone 2. And I always felt like that kept my legs supple and fresh and helped prevent them from like those cement block feelings. That'd be one way to do it. You could ride the rollers, Sam. You could ride fixed gear. We talked about that in the podcast a couple weeks ago. Concentrate on like leg speed, higher cadence, I suppose.
Andy Fountain says, I have spent the last 6 years being coached one-on-one in preparation for the UK's cyclocross season, September to January. Due to financial constraints, I have had to stop the one-on-one coaching, and luckily, I found FasCat and Optimize. I've decided to have a total reset this year and miss the cross season to start the 30-week off-season plan and see if I can increase my power and have a better base fitness for the 2024 gravel season.
Yes.
My question is, I have the urge to enter some cyclocross races, and I know once I enter one, I'll end up entering more, probably too many. Will entering these cross races be detrimental to the 30-week plan? As I know the racing instinct in me will mean I will give it everything in each race.
That's awesome, Andy. They will not be detrimental unless like you wake up on Monday and you're crippled. You can substitute a cross race on Saturday or Sunday over top whatever like zone 2 or group rod or like muscle tension interval we had in the plan. But yeah, just, make sure you're able to keep following the plan the following Monday. And yeah, if you're having fun, cross racing is good for you. So bank that in high intensity adaptation and, keep following the plan. Go into that and know that, you may not be your old self cyclocross racing. Try to have some fun with it.
Lori Sharp asks, how do you effectively alter your training program when crossing cycling disciplines, such as from typical European road racing to American crits?
Specificity, 100%. So American crits will have athletes do a lot of zone 6 work, anaerobic. We were talking about that earlier. 1-minuters, 30-seconders, sprint workouts, Tabatas. Generally shorter rods. You can remove the long rods like week after week, which you would do with the typical European road racing. European road racing, when I think of that, I think, 3, 4, 5 hour rides, VO2 max intervals, 1-minuters, threshold work. So, but yeah, when you get into the American crits, the races are shorter, they're sharper, they're more intense. So a lot more intensity and less longer riding.
Peter Lesev asks, do I need to lose more kilograms to climb faster?
It can help, that's for sure. See how much % body fat you have first, because if you have low body fat, I wouldn't even worry about losing weight. I would just work on increasing your power output. So there's 2 parts to your power to weight ratio.
Numerator, denominator.
That's right, and work on both. But there's a time and a place for everything. So here in the off season, try to lose the weight, and then once you get past the off season, try to work on the numerator and increase that power output. But yeah, figure out where you're at, how much weight you do have to lose, and do it now, and then you won't have to worry about it in the spring.
Michael Stankiewicz Fox says, I wonder if I'm doing it right. I can't improve my FTP over the last 3 years.
Okay. Well, I think we can help you. Let's do something different. This is kind of like the question from the earlier. If you're stuck and you've plateaued, surefire way. I think Albert Einstein said it. He said, "There's insanity is doing the same thing over and over again
And expecting
results."
Yeah.
So let's do something different, Michael. Let's just change the way you've trained, and I don't know how you changed, and so I won't really worry about speaking to that. But I would just say, let's train a different way. Take a different approach. If you haven't lift weights, lift weights. If you just did train 1 hour trainer workouts all winter, let's do something different. Maybe get outside or fat bike or try doing some long rides. A lot of different things. Point is, let's just do something different, and I'm sure we can get that FTP up.
Paige Bauer asks, should you change your macros depending on the intensity of your workout for the day? How can you optimize your daily macros to be successful at both long endurance rides and shorter high intensity workouts like 30-30s? On a daily intake level, does it even matter? Or does a well-balanced overall diet set you up for success in all areas?
I think the latter. I think a well-balanced diet overall sets you up for success in all areas. I think also, when I look at the week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, you don't need to eat giant meals before those because they're shorter workouts. I don't really look at macros in terms of short rides, long rides, or high intense, low intensity rides. But when you're going to do a longer ride on Saturdays and Sundays, I generally have athletes eat more on Fridays and Saturday mornings and Saturday nights and Sunday mornings. So it's kind of like nutritional periodization to match your caloric output. When you do a big ride, you burn 4,000 calories. You want to not only put that in, you're going to have to put it back in after the ride. But yeah, I think just a general balanced overall diet will help you set you up for success in all areas.
Had dinner with Alexei Vermeulen before he got second at Gravel Nationals, 130-plus mile race. Mm-hmm. He's a skinny boy.
Yeah.
He had a pretty good size appetizer, 2 full entrees.
Nice.
And then a big dessert. So enough food for
2 people.
Yeah, 2 people.
I love it.
Not that he eats that way every time, but to your point of if you're doing a big thing the next day,
yeah,
top it off.
Yeah.
Herman Lomax, how much should 65-year athletes train?
Yeah, I mean, you should generally, you train the same way as maybe younger athletes, but you need just to maybe not train as much so you can recover, because our recovery is not as great the older we get. So pay attention to your recovery. I think if you're looking for specific hours, let's have you start with 4 to 6 hours and then get comfortable with that. If you feel like you're recovering, you've kind of really, hit your rhythm, you feel like you can do more, progress to 6 to 8. Maybe you knock out that. Training is a progression. You could do 6 to 8. You could do 4 to 6, then 6 to 8. You could try 8 to 10. Really just kind of depends on how well you're handling your training and recovery. Use Optimize to measure your training and recovery balance. Eat right. Really focus on your sleep. Don't try to boil the ocean at once. Just take it off. Rome wasn't built in a day, type of thing. Yeah.
Joe Cow asks, how do I analyze my training data?
Ooh.
That's a very short and very big question at the same time.
That's like a couple of podcasts right there. There's a variety of ways. I guess it depends on what you want to look at. I recorded a video back when YouTube first came out. God, this is like 2008. And I said, here's what I look at. I look at duration. I look at the training stress and kilojoules. Those are the first 3 things I look at from a ride. So how much you rode, and then then you can open up the file. You can look at I'll take a look at peak 5 minute, peak 20 minute. That with the training stress is kind of like how I look at it. If you did like a cool climb and I look at when you go hard. So for me nowadays, if I'm doing a solo ride, I'll just look at my power output from when I was going hard. So maybe I wasn't even going hard, so I don't even look at it. And then if I do a group ride and we really hit it, I look at like how hard I went when we were going hard during the group ride. Little things like that. Maybe you could start there. And if you want to ask us, more specific on the next question, go for it.
Greg Hansen, as a longtime 60-plus masters athlete, I trained and raced with 60 to 80 grams per hour of carbs a season. It was a game changer, as I used to be a maximum of 40 grams. Does increasing carbs mean I should make sure I increase electrolytes? And which ones? I live in Georgia, so heat and humidity are real factors from June to September.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think there's any correlation between increasing carbs and increasing electrolytes. I think you always want to maintain as high of electrolyte intake as you can because you're sweating so much. So kudos on going to 60 to 80 grams of carbohydrate per hour. And I'm not sure how many electrolytes you were having per hour, but take a look at the sports drink mix that you were using and just calculate how much you had per hour. And doesn't sound like you cramped because I think you would have mentioned it. But yeah, so whatever was going on might have worked. And if you feel like you're going to ride harder, ride longer, and that's when I go to the super sodium mixes. And I really like kind of preload and then make sure I'm matching my output when it gets super hot and long and the races are difficult.
Richard Bird asks, what is the best way to establish your max rep for squats and leg presses without hurting oneself?
Okay, great question. So you've been doing your adaptation phase. You've started with the bar and you put on 5 pounds per each time you go back and you're doing the squats, for example. And then let's say you've done that for 3 weeks. Take a look at how much you're lifting. So you've done on the last adaptation workout, you're doing 4 sets, 8 reps per set. Say you do that like 140 pounds. It's a little bit of ballpark math, but if you're doing 8 reps at 140 pounds, you might be able to do like 1 rep at 175, 180. So put it up on the rack and try it. And say that it's a piece of cake. It's like you got that. And it just depends on how much you got it by. Then you could be like, well, I think I got another 20 pounds in me. And you just put it up there and try it again. Say you barely get those 20 pounds up. So now it's like, what did I say? 180. And so now I said 175 and now you're at 195. And you just barely get, lift that. That's good. You're there. You found it out. With the leg press, it's a safe lift. So you got those catches, the safety catches, and you can get a little more aggressive on the leg press because, you lower it down, you can't lift it back up. It's like, well, that's not it. Take some weight off. And with a squat, try not to go over too much and just use where you ended in the adaptation phase as your point of reference. So you did 8 of this and kind of extrapolate up of I can do 1 of these once. Yeah.
Andrew Whitehair, if you get injured or sick during your plan, how should you adjust the plan going forward?
Great question. Honestly, I would hit that chat box in the upper right and ask us and tell us what's going on, because how long did you get sick? What was the nature of your injury? And where are you in the plan? Are you in your weights? Are you in your base? Is your racing coming up soon, or your goals, or do you have like tons of time? All of those questions will impact how we answer that. But as an example, if you're in your adaptation phase and you get sick for like 3 or 4 days, just start where you left off. So just modify your calendar. If you are in your base phase and you get sick for like when everyone was getting COVID, and then you have some racing coming up, there's a couple ways to do it. You could adjust when you start your racing, or it could be a situation like, okay, my base was pretty good. I got sick. Now I got, this much time until I race. I'm just going to switch from base to race and just keep going forward. So there's like 100. It depends. Yeah. Ask us. Chat box, upper right.
Paul Winkler, despite following an off-season strength program and despite feeling stronger during extended climbs, my explosive power still sucks. I cannot seem to get above 800 watts. What else can I do?
You could do sprints. You could sprint train. You could do anaerobic work. You also, it's like, why do you want is getting your power over 800 watts one of your goals? Does that fit in with what you're training for? Or is it like, generally physiology is funny because you get good at one thing and then it comes at the expense of being less good at the other thing, the other end of the spectrum. So you increase your steady state power output, your sprint starts to suck. You increase your sprint, and then your sustained power output is not as great as a result. So it really just, you can train to get over 800 watts. Just try doing some sprints over 800. You can do plyometrics. You can do the weight program with the power phase, variety of things. But I would say, why? I mean, it looks good I guess it looks good when you're doing your power analysis. Yeah. But it says he is following the off-season training program. So he is doing neuromuscular work. He's doing his standing starts. He's doing his power phase, his jump squats. I would work in some more sprint training, and also 800 watts. I would want to know how much do you weigh? Are you like farm watts and you're a big 200-pound man, or you're like a little horse jockey like Sepp Kuss, and he probably can't get over 800 watts either.
He seems to do okay though.
Yeah, that's right.
John Bentley. I train about 8 to 10 hours a week, both running and cycling combined. Usually I run in the morning with weekly tempo and speed runs, then ride after work for an hour with longer rides on the weekend. I've always been very slow on the bike compared to others who train about the same amount of hours. I used to race cross and mountain bike and want to start back up next season, but can't seem to get faster. Any tips?
Okay. I wish I knew if you're a multi-sport athlete, or it sounds like you're a cyclocross and mountain bike athlete. I'm a big fan. If any athlete says they're running and they're not getting any better on the bike, I'm like, let's just take the running out, because the running tends to make your power output lower, especially if you're running too much. So it says running in the morning, weekly tempo and speed runs.
It sounds like the intensity is coming in the morning on foot.
Yeah.
And then the evening ride is like a cruise recovery ride. That's me reading into the tea leaves a bit, but that's what it sounds like. It sounds like you're training, John, for running. If you've got weekly tempo and speed runs, and then you're not specifying what the riding is except just after work for an hour.
Yeah, try maybe doing your bike workouts in the morning and your runs in the afternoon, or maybe try doing your bike workouts exclusively and see if they don't improve when you run less. When we design cyclocross training, we're always like, okay, we're going to add the running in. We're always keeping an eye on their fatigue and their power. And a lot of athletes, it's like, okay, you're going to improve your run, but it's kind of come at the expense of maybe your power output. So we bring the run in and we take the run out. If you're training just for mountain biking, there's not that much running in it. And so you don't really need to run technically. So you could do without the running. That's what is that clear as mud?
David Compton, do you recommend a training block of intervals during the winter to begin spring training with an improved VO2?
Yes, in some certain cases. When I hear a block of training intervals, yes, that's what the 16 weeks of Sweet Spot is. The final fourth mesocycle is that 3-4-5 minute VO2 max progression, and you will feel pretty peppy when you get done with that. I have had athletes do reverse periodization where they were trainer bound, and we knew they were like going to Tucson in February. And it was like, we could try to build base in December, but you're going to build a lot of base when you get to Tucson. Let's just do your intervals now as opposed to later. That, was okay, worked. So it kind of depends. Go back and listen to our wintertime intensity. And the whole premise of that is let's sprinkle in a little bit of intensity while you're building your base. That seems to work the best in my experience.
D. Barbic says, I hear repeatedly that riding at a higher cadence is better and more efficient. My natural riding cadence hovers around 80 RPM. I've tried to adapt to a higher cadence of about 90, but it is a considerable effort mentally and physically for me to stay in that range. My body reverts back if I don't stay focused all the time. Am I at a real disadvantage riding at a lower cadence? Should I keep working to trying to adapt to a higher cadence, or just go with what my body seems to be comfortable with?
Sounds like your natural cadence is about 80 RPMs, which is fine. A lot of successful athletes have a cadence of 80. Here's what I would want to know, D, is when you climb and it gets steep, does your cadence plummet down to like 70 or 60 or 50? In that case, we want to look at getting some bigger gears to enable you to maintain that like 75 to 80 RPM. But yeah, you're just a masher. That's all right. Yeah, Jan Ulrich was a masher. He was pretty good.
Another thing to keep an eye on is watts. Like when your cadence goes up, do your watts go up at the same or higher RPM?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's more extreme, but sometimes just a super torquey, like if you're doing 50 RPM, it may feel like you're doing a lot more work than you actually are. But that doesn't sound like it's the case. Eric Lombardo, what are your team's thoughts on performing a 20-minute power test or any kind of FTP test on a hill or climb when the majority of intervals in training and races have significant climbing?
Yeah.
Thinking this would not maybe be a true FTP test, but would correlate well to the power numbers in training and racing.
Actually, Eric, that's how we recommend all our athletes do their field tests. Uphill, full gas, 20 minutes. So yeah, that's actually the best way to do it. So, that's how I have Phil do it. All the pros I've coached, that's how I personally do it. We head over to like Left Hand Canyon or Sunshine. Any steady grade, climb is going to help you get the most out of your body. And your general, Coach Andrew and Ben, you guys just put out that training tip. There's more watts outside. And there's also more watts when you're going uphill. So if you want to, it's not like it's non-specific, especially at the race. Like you always want to train on terrain. Like if you're training for a race that has a significant amount of climbing, heck yeah, do your test uphill.
Do it.
Yeah.
Hans Mule, if you take 6 weeks off in January, February to ski, should you start back with the weight program or go straight to the bike?
Great question. It kind of depends on when you want to be fast after that. If you got time to lift weights and then do base and, be fast when you want to be fast, I would always try to look into doing the weights. But then like so you're skiing in February and you want to be fast in April, then you may not have time to lift weights and you might go straight to intervals. And if I wonder if we're talking about Nordic skiing or skiing. Don't know.
Now we're talking about Nordic skiing. Brandon Berger says, I cross-country ski race in the winter. How can I include cycling in my training so I'm ready to go in early spring? Mm-hmm. Also interested in hearing how and when you'd include weight training when wanting to both ski race and bike race. Mm-hmm. A race is Berkey late February and Czech 40 mid-September.
Yeah. I've coached a lot of athletes that lift weights and ride the bike and successfully Nordic race. So it's really just a question of when you do what. And I would try to get in your 10-week weightlifting before you get onto the snow. So before the snow starts piling up and you start skiing. And then when you're doing your ski training, count that as base. And if you're not skiing every day, then you're riding your bike in a base sort of way to supplement and augment that. And then once you start racing, you may, you're probably just riding. Just as an example, like say you're on the bike Monday through Friday, because then you have to travel to go up to the snow on the weekend. So race on the weekend. But yeah, it just kind of depends. And then, the closer you get to your A races, the Berkey and the Czech, late February. Oh, the Czech 40 is the bike race, not a ski race.
I'm guessing that's Schwamigan.
That's Schwamigan. Yeah. So A race.
Not familiar with this northerner slang. Yeah. Czech 40.
So A race is Berkey late February. You bank that race, and then honestly, then you're gonna need to stop skiing at some point after that, and then it's like 100% bike, and then you're going through the traditional. You're building, and then you're doing your intervals, and then you're doing some racing, and then you're doing like. Sweet spot marathon style training for Schwamigan. That's how I would recommend it. You do it. Yeah.
Another northerner, Tyler Zucks. I'm a college student just about to finish my season at Iceman. I am planning on starting my season at Belgium Off-Ride, Arizona, then staying the week down there to ride. I will also have a couple weeks around the new year to ride in North Carolina. Assuming my A race is Barry-Roubaix, what type of riding should I do at these off-season / base phase training camps?
Mm-hmm. A lot. I do a lot of riding. Really, take advantage of it. If you're when when we did our camp in Tucson, I think we did 16 hours in 4 days. It averaged out to be about 4 hours per day, and it was a 4-day routing camp. Just look at trying to get this massive dose of training in, and the style of training, a lot of sweet spot. Concentrate on like your OTS. Try to do like 200, 300 OTS rides day after day after day, which, is a lot of OTS. And so you're doing your training camp in North Carolina. It's a lot of climbing. Hit the sweet spot on the climbs, and then kind of, zone 2 in tempo on the flats, and just big honking rides. And April 24th, you should be pretty good. You could even do some of your gravel simulation rides down in North Carolina. It kind of depends on when that camp is. Oh, it's New Year's. Just volume.
Aaron Amar says, I only have pedal-based power on my road bike and therefore my indoor training as well. My main events next year are gravel races. How important is it to have power on my gravel bike? At the moment, I go by heart rate and RPE and mostly reserve my interval training for the road bike. My worry is that having different power meters across the bikes gives unreliable... Excuse me. My worry is having different power meters across the bikes gives unreliable values in comparison.
Yeah.
This has been the bane of Coach Frank's, maybe not the bane, but this is.
That's why I have gray hair. Yeah.
Not the first time Frank has dealt with this issue.
Yeah. Having different brand power meters on different bikes is a huge problem. And if you want to solve that problem, the best way to do it is standardize your equipment. Have the same power meter on all bikes. Not having power on your gravel bike is not really a problem. Having a different power meter on your gravel bike than you do on your road bike, that could be a problem. And then because these devices, they're not giving you the same number. And long ago it was like, I got the SRM on my time trial bike. I got the power tap on my road bike. And it's all this, people are like, I got my time trial FTP and I got my road bike FTP. It's really their FTP was the same. It was the power meter was reading differently. So it can make the data analysis way more complicated. If you're just trying to quantitate your training load and add it all up and, maintain consistency, you're probably going to be okay, even without a power meter on your gravel bike. But if you're worried about it, the way to fix it is standardize the power meters, like cork to cork to cork, or stages, that sort of thing. And then the last thing you want to do is mix pedal based with like crank based. Then it's a whole nother level of complexity.
Bodhi Kier says, with cyclocross starting, do you think there's any value in run training? And if so, what should we be doing?
Yeah, for your run training and cyclocross, I would reserve that to when you're practicing your skills. So you're going to be doing a lot of dismounting and remounting, carrying your bike, skills-based practice. That's when you get in your run training. So don't go off jogging. Don't do anything like that. But as you practice, that's your run training. And in next year, when you train before the season, you get a lot of that cyclocross run workouts for run training. But now in the season, like on Wednesdays, for example, do a lot of skills, a lot of barrier running, hill running, shoulder carries, so forth.
Glenn Murphy, I'm a master's athlete and am doing my best to recover with better sleep, but do you have any napping tips? Time of day, duration, does it really help recovery?
Yeah, I think so. Naps help. My formula for naps is, this is the ideal Saturday. You wake up, you get the coffee, the internet, the good breakfast, you go on a nice long ride, you come back, you get on the couch, you hit the internet, you check your Strava, you've had your post-workout meal, and you're watching TV, and it gets a little sleepy. And you just doze off, and 20 minutes will do, maybe 30. If you really want to do it, go up into your bedroom, draw the shades, turn on the noisemaker, and try to get nice and quiet. It's when you got kids and family, it's tough, but generally in the afternoon. Don't try to take a nap at like 5 p.m. That'll mess up your sleep that night. And I'm usually not sleepy before noon. I don't know about you. Yeah, in the afternoon, you get that lull. There's no 20, 30 minutes is, I would say sufficient. Yeah,
the same things that help with good sleep at night, cold and dark.
Yeah.
Help.
Good long ride helps with a nap too.
Mm-hmm. Helen Odenwald. How often should we be incorporating interval training if we are new to cycling?
Yeah. I don't know, once a week, For example, maybe just start with some general riding, and then I would say what not to do is interval training 4 to 5 times per week. And it also kind of depends on the kind of intervals. You can do aerobic intervals like tempo and sweet spot intervals. You can do those more frequently. When I hear interval training, though, I'm kind of thinking zone 4, 5, and 6, and I'd limit that 1 to 2 times per week. Yeah.
We're coming up to the 90-minute mark, so we're just going to take one more question for this session, and then we'll be back with yet another edition of Ask a FasCat. Thank you so much for all your questions. We appreciate you.
Yeah, we got to pick a winner, too.
And we are ending talking about the boogeyman.
What?
Ryan McCarthy says, "Hey, FasCats and kittens. I was wondering if you have any advice for getting training rides in at night. My only consistent time to train is once the kids are in bed, so typically after dark. I lose motivation if I have to do every ride on the trainer." I hear you. I feel you.
Me too.
I have a decent light setup, but it still feels like it's harder to hit targets in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more worried about animals or the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on getting over the fear of riding in the dark? Or do you have any other suggestions for hitting the nighttime workouts?
I'm thinking a big car light for a light. Like the more light, the better if you're afraid of the dark. I wouldn't do intervals in the dark. I would just concentrate on fun riding. Maybe you could do it fast. Good gear. Make sure you're bundled up and warm, unless it's like warm wherever you are. Safe roads. I would definitely not ride on the roads where there's cars. That would be trail and gravel for me personally. Good safe roads. Night workouts. I don't know, man. What do you think of night workouts?
One of my favorite night workouts is Zwift team racing. That is absolutely in the dark, but it does not feel like a workout at all because it's Tuesday night group race. Get on with the fellow stages team. That is indoors. Well, he's asking about other night tips like that. Because just doing workout after workout on the trainer is the way to crack them and madness. Yeah. But if it feels like playing for me, once a week for, a month or two, that's a fun way to do it. ZRL is a series. You can, have teams of, you need to have 6 either guys or gals, and you can have bigger teams that rotate different people in and out. And that's a super fun way to get some high intensity done in your garage or basement or living room when it's cold and dark outside. So that's not the entire solution, but that is a solution that can work.
One other idea, Ryan, is maybe you've heard us talk about the hour of power, where you just go out and rip it for the time that you have. What we call freestyle sweet spot or hour of power. So you don't really worry about intervals. You just ride hard the whole time, and then you just try to get in the maximum amount of work you can do in the time that you do have, and you don't have to worry about intervals. And, because you may need to not ride that fast when it gets super dark or something like that. And if you're on the trail, there's a lot of, I don't know. I think the fact that you're riding at night is pretty killer. So kudos on you.
Good on you for getting out there. One tip Coach Isaiah had for the off season was, riding a single speed is that's a way to let the terrain come to you, or let the workout come to you, I think was how he put it. Buying a whole separate bike, that may be excessive, but to Frank's point of being safe, like getting yourself on a trail or at least a quiet gravel road that's maybe a bit uphill, then just the terrain will cause you to push a bit in a way that's hopefully still very safe, so you're not having to try to read the tiny digits on your computer, so you're hitting targets. You're just keeping your eyes up the road, and the tilted road or trail is helping to get some intensity. So
and watch out for I guess
my answers are playing in both of those instances.
All right, well that's 50 questions. We're on pace for one of our longest podcasts of the year. What was your favorite question, Ben?
So I like the boogeyman question just because that was funny, but I also appreciated the fact that Casey kind of stumped us a bit asking about the road shoes in gravel versus mountain bike shoes. I'm captivated by that question because I don't know that for sure, and I feel like you were able to very cleanly and articulately answer all the questions with some lots of tried and true FasCat answers. But that was still a TBD. So that's a different sort of favorite question, but that's the one that stuck for me. What do you think, Frank?
The boogeyman question was great, and all the weightlifting questions were great as well, and figuring out when to stop weightlifting and base. I loved all the intensity questions and all the sweet spot questions. Love those. Keep those coming. Brian Gee, gave a good one about reframing goals. I really like that in the way that we were able to answer the difficulty of racing as you get older and choosing different styles. But yeah, I really agree with Casey. And I'm thinking like I think there's a company out there called Plantasia, and it's like this running power meter you put in your shoe. It's like, as like, like the insoles.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that is possible. And you measure like the power on the insoles from like the power meter on the crank. I don't know. That could be like someone's like master's thesis. But anyway,
that's a rabbit hole I'm going to go down. If you listeners, if you've got ideas, holler at me. Holler at us on Instagram.
Plantasia. But yeah, Casey, congratulations. You have won the most thoughtful question, and your wishes will come true with that coveted FasCat Castelli jersey. And it was so great to meet you also at Steamboat Gravel this past year. Yes. Congratulations.
Excellent. And with that, listeners, we will sign off. We'll be back soon with another batch of your excellent questions.
But in the meantime, another winner too.
Yeah, maybe it's like the bonus is twice as many questions, twice as many answers, and twice as many jerseys and bibs doled out.
Yeah. Well, listeners, thank you so much for all your questions. Thank you to Castelli for the help in getting the word out. And as you know, we like to say, work hard, ride fast, have fun. And as always, FTFP.